Hi, I'm Anya Lichtarovich, and this is Somewhere on Earth. I'm in London. This week we have a very different episode. We've put in some of our most popular and favourite soap shows into Google Notebook LM. Google Notebook LM is an AI-powered research assistant that helps users organise, summarise and understand information from their own uploaded documents and other sources. It acts as a virtual research assistant, allowing you to ground the AI in your specific documents such as PDFs, Google Docs, websites and YouTube videos to get accurate and relevant answers with clear citations. That explanation was also written by AI, by the way. We've deliberately not edited it as we want your opinion on this AI-generated show. Could it be the future of podcasting? It's time to make up your own mind.
If you're looking for the quickest way to get really thorough, actionable knowledge about the messy realities of the digital world, then this is your deep dive. Today, we are wrestling with, the question of accountability in this age of rapid tech growth, specifically how convenience often hides a pretty toxic cost. So the mission today is to unpack two recent and frankly crucial findings that really illustrate this kind of systemic failure. First, we're dissecting a study showing how frequently popular AI browser assistants violate your privacy, capturing data as sensitive as, believe it or not, your social security number. And second, we have an in-depth look at how technology is being weaponized against LGBTQ plus communities in several African nations, turning platform negligence into actual physical violence and entrapment.
Right, and these two topics, they might seem miles apart at first glance. But they are both, I think, powerful examples of this systemic neglect in the current digital era. We're really looking at where platform design choices, whether it's optimizing for speed or just failing to enforce moderation, create these profound vulnerabilities. On one hand, productivity might mean sacrificing privacy. And on the other, access to connection, online connection, can mean an increased risk of persecution. It's this double-edged sword.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We'll start with those hidden dangers, the ones lurking in tools you might be using every single day. We're diving into a recent study. It was presented at the Uzbekistan Security Symposium concerning popular AI browser add-ons. We're talking about tools like GPT for Google, Merlin, Cider, Monica, those kinds of things. Tools designed to make your web browsing smarter, supposedly.
Exactly. These extensions, they promise to embed generative AI right into your everyday use, summarizing research papers, answering complex questions, maybe even filling out web forms for you. But the researchers didn't just look at the functionality, they looked at the network traffic, what's going out. And what they found was that these systems were, aggressively collecting raw user data, often far beyond what seemed necessary for their stated function.
Okay, aggressive collection. How deep does that surveillance actually go? Is this just like standard IP address logging, or are we talking about genuinely sensitive information here?
Well, the specifics are what make this study so compelling, I think. Several assistants were found sending the full, unedited content of web pages, so links, text, titles, directly back to their own servers. But probably the most alarming example was the Merlin extension. It was observed actually recording sensitive form inputs.
Okay, give us the brass tacks here. What kind of sensitive data are we talking about being recorded and sent off?
Yeah, this included capturing actual health data from a user filling out a form on, I believe it was a university portal. And in another instance, recording the social security number that was typed into an official IRS website.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, this is the difference between, annoying background tracking and what looks like outright digital malpractice. Other extensions, like Cider and Dynam, they were observed sharing user queries and unique identifiers with third parties, like Google Analytics, which then enables, really effective cross-site tracking of users.
Wait, SSNs and health records. I mean, the immediate reaction from a lot of people is going to be, well, if I use a free tool, I am the product. How do we counter that pervasive industry narrative that this extreme level of data capture is just, an unavoidable cost of convenience?
Well, we counter it with data because the stakes are just too high. Capturing health data, for instance, it doesn't just expose individuals to huge risks if there's a breach. It also potentially violates privacy standards, like HIPPP, that's the health privacy law here in the US, when health information is just indiscriminately captured like that. And more broadly, this type of raw input enables really aggressive profiling.
Okay, that's a key distinction. We need to establish that right now. Can you help us understand the difference between profiling and personalization in this context?
Sure. So profiling is essentially the system learning core attributes about you. Your estimated income, maybe your gender, your political affiliation, or specific health interests, all based on the raw data it harvests, like the text you type or the pages you look at. Personalization, on the other hand, is the system using that profile it built to shape your experience. So maybe suggesting a particular medication ad based on your health profile or a very niche financial service. The danger we see here is this automatic, aggressive, and crucially unauthorized profiling of users based on data that really should never leave their browser in the first place.
It feels like digital privacy is basically a trust fall, but with an invisible safety net, doesn't it? But you mentioned there was an exception in the study. If most of them are operating this way, doesn't that just prove the current market mechanism actually favors surveillance?
It definitely highlights that market pressure towards data maximization, yeah. But it also provides a roadmap for, let's say, responsible design. Only one extension in the study, Perplexity, really stood out as a positive exception. It managed to achieve its functionality without collecting full web page content, without tracking unique user identifiers, and it explicitly stated it did not retain memory between sessions.
So that proves the design choice is intentional then. It shows that responsible data handling, clear opting and consent, maybe solutions like local processing, they're viable options. Convenience doesn't have to be synonymous with surveillance.
Absolutely. We should be demanding solutions that look more like Perplexity, not like Merlin. The technology exists to restrict data sharing and limit tracking. The lack of implementation is clearly a choice.
Okay, so we've established that privacy by design is a choice, not some technical constraint. Now let's pivot from these hidden design failures like capturing SSNs to where platform operational negligence shows up as direct, terrifying, real-world harm. We're moving to the digital threats faced by LGBTQ+ communities in many African countries, and we're using findings from the Access Now report, rainbow burning.
Yeah, in this persecution, it's multi-layered, it's complex, it's fueled partly by existing laws that criminalize consensual same-sex acts, old anti-sodomy laws, but that's combined with a rise in political homophobia and, significantly, foreign interference that drives massive amounts of anti-LGBTQ disinformation online. So the digital space doesn't just reflect this intolerance, it actively amplifies it and, frankly, turns it into tools of harm.
The Access Now report looked at case studies across sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Ethiopia, Uganda, Nigeria. What are the specific mechanisms being used to weaponize tech in these places?
The methods really range from state-sanctioned incitement all the way to dangerous doxing campaigns against individuals. In Kenya and Ghana, for example, online content often featured political leaders actually calling for queer people to be killed or banished. And this rhetoric wasn't just left online, it was digital noise. It mobilized anti-LGBT protests offline, which resulted in severe real-world conflict.
And what about the organized campaigns targeting specific individuals? That sounds terrifying.
It is. That brings us to Ethiopia. Bad actors used anonymous TikTok accounts to basically collate pictures of individuals accused of being queer. And the criteria were incredibly trivial sometimes based on hair color or piercings or just posting a picture with a rainbow flag somewhere. They'd then post these images with rhetoric calling the victims a stain who need to be killed. Just horrific language. And the consequence of this doxing was brutal. One victim was actually attacked by their own university classmates and was forced to flee the country entirely.
That is immediate direct violence stemming from what seems like platform negligence. What about schemes that use the platforms themselves for entrapment?
Yes. In Ghana, criminal gangs were found to be actively infiltrating dating apps using fake profiles, the classic honey traps, right? They would lure queer people to meet up, then kidnap them, take non-consensual intimate images, and then use these images for long-term blackmail against the victims and sometimes their families. This targeting was so pervasive that even non-social media platforms like WhatsApp were being infiltrated as people tried to find safer ways to communicate.
And the Ugandan cases you mentioned, they involve this terrifying combination of digital entrapment and state-sanctioned torture.
Precisely. Entrapment schemes in Uganda were discovered that actually lured LGBTQ+ people to meeting spots located strategically right next to police stations. This led to immediate arrest, detention, and some documented cases, forced anal examinations, which the UN unequivocally classifies as torture. So the digital tool is literally used to deliver victims directly into the hands of authorities, enforcing these really severe anti-homosexuality laws.
Okay, so given these clear life or death consequences, how did the massive tech platforms themselves, the owners of TikTok, WhatsApp, the dating apps, how did they respond when this kind of malicious content was reported?
Well, this is where we see that operational failure, really linking back to the kind of design failures we talked about earlier with the browser extensions. Access Now documented a huge disparity in response. When Access Now, were able to escalate reports directly to platform contacts using their specific helplines or partner channels, the malicious content was often taken down relatively quickly.
There's a but coming, isn't there?
There is. But when everyday users relied on the standard, accessible in-app reporting mechanisms, the button you or I would click, the content often remained alive for days, sometimes weeks. This strongly suggests a systemic failure of moderation resource allocation. It seems platforms aren't allocating sufficient resources to moderate local languages effectively, or to understand critical cultural context, or simply to respond fast enough in these high-risk jurisdictions. And that creates a safety gap that just escalates harm for the most vulnerable people.
That failure to enforce their own rules through the standard mechanism, that sounds like clear negligence. So we've seen negligence in code capturing SSNs with AI extensions and negligence in enforcement, failing to remove content that facilitates kidnapping and violence. What is the fundamental tie here? What connects these threads?
I think the common systemic failure is a lack of institutional accountability when platforms prioritize speed and scale above all else. Whether they're maximizing user profiling data to gain market share, like with the extensions, or failing to invest in adequate human content moderation in high-risk regions. The outcome is basically the same. The most sensitive data and the most vulnerable communities end up paying the price for, essentially, corporate convenience or cost-cutting.
Right. We do see that organizations are trying to step in and mitigate this gap. Access Now offers that 247 digital security helpline and safety guides for people facing threats. And critically, litigation in Uganda actually forced the repeal of a mandatory reporting section in the country's anti-homosexuality law. That's a win.
Yeah, these actions show that change is possible, but they really shouldn't be necessary in the first place. The core insight, I think, remains. The system seemed to default to aggressive profiling, and they default to inadequate moderation, at least until significant outside pressure is applied. And this requires us, as users, to practice constant critical analysis of the tools we choose to integrate into our lives.
Okay. We've covered a lot here, everything from hidden AI surveillance grabbing your most personal data to truly life and death safety issues enabled by platform neglect in regions where anti-LGBTQ laws are tightening. Hopefully, you now have the knowledge to question not just what a digital tool promises to do for you, but how it actually handles your information and who it ultimately protects through its design choices and its enforcement policies, or fails to protect.
Absolutely. The digital world, like it or not, forces us all to be our own chief security officers to some extent. You really need to question the necessity of every tool that asks for deep permissions or access to your data.
So think about that massive failing of the in-app reporting for vulnerable groups in Africa we discussed. If the most accessible safety mechanisms, the ones provided by the biggest tech companies on Earth, fail under duress, what personalized systems must you put in place to ensure your own digital security and safety, especially when you're using tools that claim to make your life easier while maybe, just maybe, secretly maximizing their profile of your identity? We'll leave you with that thought.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. So you've given us this stack of sources, and wow, they cover some huge areas where tech is really shaking things up, socially and economically.
They really do. A fascinating mix.
Yeah, so our mission, like always, is to cut through that complexity, pull out the key stuff, and basically give you the shortcut to knowing what's actually going on.
And we're jumping from, how data is helping tiny farms all the way to, well, renewable energy concepts that almost seem to bend the rules of physics.
And even how tech's changing things like culture and religion. It's quite the range.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start big picture. Thousands of miles away, actually, in Uzbekistan. It's going through this massive economic shift. But the sources say it's not really about digging stuff out of the ground.
Exactly. It's focused on people, on digital solutions. That's the core insight here.
Right. So this story really kicks off around 2018. According to the sources.
Yeah, there was this strategic shift from the government. They decided their biggest asset wasn't minerals or metals.
But it's people. Their ingenuity.
Precisely. Investing in human capital.
Right.
And they moved fast on that.
We saw that with the IT park of Uzbekistan, right?
Yeah.
Offering these huge incentives, like zero taxes for companies there.
Yeah, zero taxes. The goal was to build up their own tech sector, but also, crucially, to get those companies exporting their solutions, thinking globally from the start.
It's a smart play, investing in people. But what's really interesting is how quickly they're applying this digital stuff to, like, really traditional sectors.
And the standout example has to be Grows, this AgTech platform.
The scale is just mind-blowing when you read about it. Who's it for? Like 5.5 million smallholder farmers?
5.5 million, yeah. And these farmers, they produce something like over 80% of the country's agricultural output.
80%.
Mm.
But they've been kind of left behind by banks and financial institutions.
Totally overlooked. They often operate outside the formal banking system, no credit history, no collateral. It's a massive barrier.
So Grows comes in, it's a free app, Android, iOS, trying to fix that.
Well, first, it's a practical tool. It helps them manage their crops more effectively. It uses AI to spot pests or diseases.
Okay, like a pocket advisor.
Exactly. And it suggests sustainable ways to deal with them. But the big question is trust, right? How do you get millions of farmers who've relied on tradition for generations to suddenly trust an app? Especially when they're often exploited by middlemen.
Yeah, good point.
The trust seems to come from, well, delivering real, immediate value. The advice isn't generic. It's about improving their yield, their sustainability.
And that sustainability piece is huge there, isn't it? Because of the whole history.
Yeah.
The sources mention the great Soviet legacy.
Oh, absolutely. That legacy is the environmental disaster zone left by decades of monoculture farming, especially cotton.
Which led to things like the Aral Sea drying up.
Yeah.
And just wrecked land.
Exactly that. So Grows isn't just about tech. It's actively trying to push back against those old destructive practices. It encourages, rational use of fertilizers, pesticides.
It's like an environmental mission wrapped in a farming app.
You could say that. And then there's the other layer, beyond just farming tips, the finance and the supply chain side.
Right. This is where it gets really disruptive. It digitizes the farmer's crop, makes it like a quantifiable asset.
Yeah, it turns the crop data into something banks can understand, and then it connects the farmer directly, no middlemen, to suppliers for things like seeds or fertilizer, and also to customers.
And the banks are integrated right into the app for microloans.
That's the game changer. Suddenly, these smallholders who had zero bargaining power, they have access to finance. They can actually fund deals, maybe get better prices on supplies.
So the data itself becomes the key to financial inclusion for people totally left out before.
Data is power for the underserved. It's a classic theme, but seeing it applied on this scale is something else.
Okay, but it's not just farming, right? The sources mentioned a couple of other platforms, Kuzin and Wasteless. Let's take Kuzin first.
Right, Kuzin. This one's aimed at micro businesses. We're talking about 4 million self-employed people. The real backbone of local commerce.
Like little shops, home businesses, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Kuzin is basically an ERP enterprise resource planning system for them. It handles orders, delivery, payments.
And it links them up with the tax office. And banks, too.
Yeah, makes everything seamless, formalizes their operations.
And the sources highlighted a really significant social impact here, particularly around gender.
This is fascinating. Apparently, 80% of the people using Kuzin and benefiting are women.
80%. In what kind of businesses?
Often in very traditional areas, making homemade food, beauty services, handicrafts, stuff that was often informal, cash in hand.
So the platform helps formalize their income.
Yes. And by doing that, it gives them a documented track record, a credit history, which means they can finally access proper loans, maybe expand their business.
So it's directly helping close that gender pay gap, giving women real economic power.
Demonstrably, yes. It's turning precarious work into something sustainable and scalable, a really powerful example of systemic change through tech.
Okay, that's Kuzin. And the last one in this Uzbek segment was Wasteless, focused on the circular economy.
Yeah, Wasteless. Another great example of applying that digital-first thinking to a practical problem. They tackle PE, plastic waste.
Like plastic bottles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They collect it from places like hotels, schools, businesses, and the key thing is they ensure it gets recycled back into new bottles.
Which is better than turning it into, say, fabric.
Much better, yeah. Higher value recycling, lower environmental impact. And they use AI to plan the collection routes for their vehicles, making it super efficient.
Smart routing, so less fuel used, lower CO2 emissions.
And keeps more plastic out of landfills. It's a neat, targeted application of AI for sustainability.
Okay, so Uzbekistan is showing how data can empower millions at the micro level. Let's shift gears completely now. From micro empowerment to, well, macro energy and some pretty out there physics.
Right, this next one is definitely on the wild side of innovation.
We're talking about G3 Power. This was presented at CES, the big tech show, by Lucas Ravkangareta.
That's the one. And the sources describe it as a renewable energy technology using, well, a combination of gravity, Archimedes thrust, buoyancy, and electromagnetic induction.
Gravity, buoyancy, induction. Sounds almost too elegant, doesn't it? What does this system actually look like?
It's basically a tall column, minimum 8 meters high, apparently, with 3 of those meters buried underground.
Okay, a big tube. How does it supposedly generate power? Walk us through the cycle.
All right, so first, they drop a special mass down the tube. It's described as light density, partly filled with air, and it has magnets embedded in it.
Magnets, so it's falling through wires.
Exactly. The tube is wired.
Wow.
As the magnet mass falls due to gravity, it moves through those wires and generates electricity. That's the electromagnetic induction part, like a linear motor working in reverse.
Okay, so power on the way down, got it. But then how does it get back up without using up all the energy it just made? That's always the catch with these things.
That's the clever or maybe controversial part. When the mass hits the water basin at the bottom of the tube.
There's water at the bottom.
Yes. And because the mass is designed to be lighter than water, Archimedes' principle kicks in. Buoyancy pushes it up.
But wouldn't it just float up kind of slowly? How do they make it a fast, continuous cycle and get energy on the way up too?
That's where these internal valves and pressure management come in. The sources mention managing differential pressure. Essentially, they create a pressure difference.
To kind of pop the mass back up quickly.
That seems to be the idea. Amplify the natural buoyancy to make the ascent rapid, maybe completing a cycle every second or so. And because the tube is wired, the magnets moving up generate electricity too.
So induction works both ways, down and up.
Apparently so. The claim is this creates steady power, 247. Doesn't matter if it's sunny or windy.
And that continuous power is the big selling point, isn't it? What kind of output are we talking?
The baseline residential system is projected at 1 kilowatt per hour. That works out to about 730 kilowatt hours a month.
Okay, and the average home uses maybe 900 kilowatts a month. So it's a decent chunk, though not everything.
Right, a significant contribution. And they scale up. Those residential units might cost $15,000 to $75,000. But they envision huge industrial ones, 150 meters tall, potentially hitting 5 megawatts.
5 megawatts. That's serious power. And you could sell any extra back to the grid, presumably.
That's the model, yeah. Reliable baseload power.
Okay, but we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The sources mention skepticism. It sounds a bit like a perpetual motion machine, doesn't it?
It absolutely triggers those alarm bells. That's the critical angle here. Yeah. G3 Power claims a yield of around 50%, meaning they capture half the potential energy from gravity and thrust.
What about the energy needed to run the system itself?
Yeah.
Opening and closing those valves, managing the water pressure. It takes energy, right?
Exactly. That's the fundamental physics question. Does the energy harvested from the fall and the pop descent significantly exceed the energy needed to run the control system and manage those pressures?
The net energy gain. It all hinges on that.
Precisely. If the control system is super efficient and uses only a tiny fraction of the generated power, then maybe the physics holds up. But if it takes a lot of energy to keep the cycle going,
then the net gain could be small or zero or even negative.
Right. And it's crucial to remember the sources state this is still a prototype. They're looking for investors, aiming for a launch later this year, apparently.
So verdict is definitely still out. Intriguing, maybe even revolutionary if it works, but needs proof.
Absolutely. One to watch for sure. The sheer audacity is interesting.
Okay, from potentially physics-bending energy, let's pivot back to tech that's addressing very real, very human needs right now. Niche AI and robotics applications.
Yeah, first up is caregiving. The sources introduce us to Feedy. It's a robotic arm unit, self-contained, from a company called Semi-Robotics.
And the idea came from the CEO's own experience, caring for his father.
That's right, Christoph Stelm. He saw how exhausting and time-consuming feeding someone can be. So Feedy is designed to actually spoon-feed a user.
Wow, okay, but it's not just a mechanical arm, is it? There's AI involved.
A lot of AI, actually. It uses cameras, touch sensors. It adapts to the person. It learns their pace.
Learns their pace. How?
It detects when they've actually taken the food from the spoon before offering the next bite. But what's really smart is the food preference part.
What do you mean?
The plate has different compartments, right?
Yeah.
If the user refuses food from one specific compartment 3 times in a row...
The robot just stops offering it. It figures out they don't like it.
Exactly. The AI registers it as disliked and avoids it. That level of personalization is pretty amazing for a robot.
That is clever. And the practical benefit, the sources make it pretty clear, is saving time for caregivers.
Huge time savings. Think about a care home scenario. The source gives an example. A nurse might take, say, an hour and a half to manually feed 5 residents.
Okay.
Using 4 feed units, that same nurse could potentially feed those 5 people in just 20 minutes.
20 minutes versus 90, that's massive.
It's equivalent to saving basically half a full-time employee's workload just on feeding.
And the cost. Does it pay for itself quickly?
It seems so. The payback period really depends on local labor costs, obviously. In Poland, maybe 3 months of a nurse's salary buys the unit.
But somewhere more expensive, like Switzerland.
It could be as quick as 1 month's salary, so the economics are compelling.
But there's a but, isn't there? They have a working prototype. Care homes want it.
Yep, fully functional prototype, demand from care homes. But they're facing the same challenge as G3 Power, interestingly. They need investment, about 1 million euros to actually start production.
The classic scale-up hurdle. Fascinating tech, clear need, but needs funding to reach people.
Okay, now for perhaps the most intimate application area, how AI is intersecting with culture, heritage, and even faith.
Yeah, the sources bring in an academic viewpoint here. From Professor Shreva Sahasranama, talking AI and the metaverse in this context.
His core idea seems to be about access. AI making the previously inaccessible accessible.
Like deciphering ancient texts, things humans struggle with.
Exactly. Think about those charred scrolls found near Pompeii from the Vesuvius eruption in AD 79, severely damaged. AI is helping read them.
Incredible. And translation to ancient languages.
Yes, taking things like Latin or Sanskrit and not just translating words, but providing context, making them truly understandable to us now.
Which leads to these specialized AI models.
Yeah.
The sources mention SLMs, small language models.
Right. Models trained specifically on religious texts, like Magisterium AI for the Bible, RIB-GPT for the Torah, models for the Hindu Vedas.
So you can basically chat with the scriptures, ask questions, and get deep contextual answers.
That's the idea, a highly informed, personalized interface to these incredibly complex and important texts.
And the next step, according to the professor, is mixing this with the metaverse, interacting with historical figures, or even divine ones.
Yeah, through avatars, realistic anthropomorphic avatars, maybe using smart glasses rather than clunky VR headsets eventually.
Anthropomorphic.
Yeah.
Meaning giving human qualities to non-human things.
Precisely. And we're already seeing simpler versions. The sources mention Ask Mona, that AI assistant at the Colosseum in Rome you can talk to.
Or that weird example.
Yeah.
The Impossible Torah, written in the style of Shakespeare or someone.
Bizarre, right? But it shows the trend. And it's moving towards physical forms, too.
Like the robot priest. Bless you too, giving blessings in Germany.
That's the one. And the academic discussion goes further. Could AI learn to perform repetitive religious ceremonies, like weddings or baptisms?
To help out where there aren't enough human priests. Maybe in remote areas.
That's the potential practical application being discussed, assisting clergy, filling gaps.
But wow, that opens up a whole can of worms, doesn't it? Theologically speaking.
Oh, huge questions. If an AI performs a sacrament, does it count? What's the spiritual validity? Authenticity? Authority? Theologians are grappling with this right now.
I bet they are.
But the adoption seems to be happening anyway, especially with younger people. The professor mentioned Roblox churches.
Churches inside a video game, with avatar priests and congregations.
Apparently so. It suggests this boundary between the physical sacred and the digital sacred is getting blurrier than we might think. #outro.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground here. We went from, data-giving economic power to small farmers in Uzbekistan.
To the very edge of physics with gravity power.
And landed in these really intimate spaces. AI in caregiving, and AI interacting with our history, our culture, our faith.
It's quite the journey. And if there's one thread running through it, maybe it's about how digital tools, how data are becoming this new source of access, of power, of inclusion, particularly for groups or areas that were previously, neglected or inaccessible.
Like the farmers, or maybe even access to damaged history.
Right. But that leads to a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on, building on that last segment. If AI is now starting to interpret, summarize, even present our most foundational texts, the Vedas, the Torah, the Bible, ancient histories, what does that mean long-term for how we understand cultural truth? How much authority do we or should we give these AI systems, these often anthropomorphic interfaces, over the stories that define who we are?
Who controls the narrative when the narrator is an algorithm? That is a challenging thought.
Something to ponder.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive through your sources today. Lots to think about, and we definitely encourage you to explore these topics further.
That's it. Get in touch via hello@somewhereonearth.co or via WhatsApp on +44 7486 329 484. For more information or to check out the other shows on the Evergreen Network, please visit evergreenpodcasts.com. The production manager is Liz Toohey. The editor is me, Anya Lichtarowicz. Somewhere on Earth is a proud partner of the Evergreen Podcast Network, and our sponsors are Roost and Sazians.